I'm going to tell you something so counterintuitive that it's going to be hard to believe.
The rich oftentimes have bad outcomes. There's like a term for that. It's called VIP syndrome.
It's so at odds with the way that we think about how the medical system and even capitalism in general works that has made me reconsider some of the ways that I think about healthcare.
So the attempt to detect disease early, which is what a lot of people want, have downstream consequences that can be very, very harmful.
This is a story about the collision between the limits of our scientific knowledge and the hubris of the ultra wealthy.
One of the things that we say in medicine is you don't ask a question unless you're going to do something with the answer.
And how some doctors think so highly of their own healing abilities that their overconfidence gets people killed.
You ask me if I have a God complex? Let me tell you something. I am God.
Modern medicine has made miracle working seem mundane. In centuries past, humanity suffered under the brutal reign of pestilence and plague, where even a simple skin infection could cut your life short. Before 1900, most surgeries were death sentences. The last century of innovation and medical breakthroughs has made mortality feel, well, almost optional. Where in the past people died of acute illnesses, often in a matter of days, the people of the modern world perish slowly of chronic conditions. And now that may sound grim, but it's actually a triumph. We collectively have the privilege to decline slowly in old age, while we also have access to nutrition and preventative care that stops many illnesses before they ever arise. And yet, medicine is not perfect. Despite all the progress, we still get sick and we still die. And now here's the part that's so counterintuitive. Sometimes people with access to the most advanced medical care and unlimited financial resources actually end up dying and having more complications than regular people. Now, there are three major reasons for this that I'll dig into in this video. The first is that people with immense resources often seek out cutting-edge treatments that seem promising, but are ultimately unproven. Second, elite patients often try to outsmart illness by seeking out multiple, ultimately contradictory opinions and fail to deliver necessary care in a timely manner. And third, and this one is really crazy, research suggests that top doctors often overestimate their own healing capabilities and that their hubris results in substandard treatments in some cases. Now, let's start with the big picture. There's a strain of thought in the modern world that the future of medicine will advance to a point where doctors will treat aging like a reversible disease.
One day we could be 80, but biologically 30.
And maybe even combat death itself. We want to believe that the advances we have had over the last century will continue to accelerate until we emerge into an entirely new paradigm of health. Not only that, but for some people in the top tiers of our economic ladder right now, they're acting like that time has already arrived. The most prominent example of those sorts of people at the moment is Bryan Johnson, a tech CEO who's now putting all of his efforts into, as he says, never dying.
Imagine if you had a personalized algorithm that would take better care of you than you can yourself, giving you near perfect physical and mental health. The trade-off is you need to say yes to the algorithm.
Any casual look at his social media, it seems that he tries out just about every cutting-edge tool that he can in the hopes that technology will outpace the inevitable decline of the human body over time.
This is me as a kid. This is a kid who was born with one of the effects of the gene therapy I'm about to do.
The idea is simple enough. With enough data and expert care, Johnson will be able to extend his life, possibly into perpetuity. But how realistic is that goal? Johnson is currently 47 years old. He says that his biomarkers peg him closer to 20 years old. But when I look at his videos, I'm not convinced that he looks any younger than me, and I'm 46.
Even though these things are extremely painful, I do love every minute of it. I love trying to solve it in all the different ways of being on caloric restriction plus restoring facial volume. It's a fun puzzle to solve.
Tell me down in the comments if you think that I should do a video about Johnson later, or maybe even an interview with him, because I think his approach is completely fascinating and to some degree, even unique. Still, on a broader level, the paradigm that Johnson is drawing on is an extension of healthcare that you may have heard of called functional medicine. And functional medicine has been all the rage in the last couple decades. It relies on the belief that data for scientific certainty exists in our bodies and our biomarkers, and that with enough testing, we can find the keys to optimal health. Now that may sound like a reasonable idea, but to understand how much of a leap of faith it actually is, I reached out to a regular on this channel.
My name is Adam Rodman. I'm an internal medicine physician and I'm an assistant professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School.
I've known Adam for years, since I started listening to his podcast Bedside Rounds, and we've done a few deep dives into the history of medicine together. Now we agree that functional medicine has really promising ideas, but there's also a danger to focusing so much on data that it misses the mark of what makes a person actually healthier.
It's important not to turn everybody into a sick person, right? Modern functional medicine says that there is no such thing as a healthy organism. They do all those tests, and then you have to live with this psychic weight that, oh, something's off. There's something about my lifespan, when in fact, the reference ranges are weird. There's natural variations in how you do the tests. There is noise, right? It's statistical noise. If I do enough tests, like we define normal by 2 standard deviations. So think about that. If I run like 20 tests, there are going to be 3 or 4 that are abnormal just because of statistics and how we've defined the normal range.
Once functional medicine starts defining disease states by statistical ranges in biomarkers, it's inevitable that doctors and algorithms identify illnesses that aren't really there. When we give over decision-making to the power of an algorithm or read biomarkers like tea leaves, there's no way to know whether a specific medical intervention works to prevent something that hasn't occurred yet. It's just a problem with the way the world works. In other words, screening can lead to unnecessary and even dangerous treatments.
So the human body's weird and kind of gross, and there are a lot of abnormal growths that you will find in a human body. So we see this all the time. We call them incidentalomas, something that is incidentally found. Sometimes you find an incidentaloma that, let's say a lung nodule. We'll do a lung nodule, for example. So I'm a non-smoker. Yeah, scan me. Maybe I had pneumonia 15 years ago and it healed and it made this little nodule in my lungs. And by looking, you cannot tell the difference between cancer and not cancer. So the question becomes, you see that nodule, what do you do?
To be clear, over-testing isn't only a problem in functional medicine. It's a well-known issue for all kinds of screenings, and we need to dig into that. But first, well, a word from our sponsors. I just want to say thank you so much for being here. This sort of work is incredibly hard, whether it's my hard-hitting investigative journalism or interviews with really amazing thinkers. It means the world to me that you are watching this, and there's a couple things you can do to support my work. There's obviously the algorithm part of things where you can hit the like and subscribe buttons down below. That helps the algorithm, spread this around to people. But more importantly, I just want you to know that I have this Substack newsletter, which is where the main support for my channel actually comes from. And I would love you to get early access to my work and be part of that community so that I can keep going up against really, really powerful players with just truth on my side. So consider doing that and consider getting my newsletter where you can see, my thoughts as we go forward. And without further ado, back to our program.
I'm Dr. Kian Modanlou. I'm a board certified general surgeon who specializes in robotic and hepatobiliary surgery and former member of the Colorado Medical Board.
I asked Kian about how knowing more about someone's underlying physiology can sometimes lead to worse care.
One of the things that we say in medicine is you don't ask a question unless you're going to do something with the answer. And so a lot of times if you get these scans, you're going to find things that are abnormal, right? Because we're not like a car that comes off the assembly line. All the internal parts don't look the same. There's variance in anatomy. And there are sometimes masses or cysts or different things that you're going to find. And whether or not they're clinically relevant kind of takes you down a rabbit hole. You've got to continue to do testing, do biopsies, and get more and more invasive to drill down to whether or not this is something that should be addressed. And so as far as I'm aware, that there is no literature that tells you that a full body MRI is of any benefit. and can lead, if you're starting to get biopsies, further testing, not only increase the cost, but increase the risk to the patient.
While screening for disease is a good idea in aggregate across the population, it's important to understand that guidelines exist for a reason. The goal isn't only to catch illness before it manifests, but also to be conservative enough so you don't test too frequently and start unnecessary and potentially dangerous treatments. In a world that believes more is always better, this is a hard lesson for a lot of people to understand.
Many of the interventions that modern medicine offers can be harmful. The medications can be harmful, and more, I think, what we see a lot here is the attempt to screen, so the attempt to detect disease early, which is what a lot of people want, have downstream consequences that can be very, very harmful. I think a lot of people don't even realize that the best evidence of our screening program, so something like colonoscopies to detect cancer, colon cancer, or pap smears are some of the best, but mammograms really have very marginal effects. They're not very effective. So when you start to get these executive physicals, getting MRIs all over your body, trying to detect cancer early, there are a lot of downstream effects from that can actually harm the individual.
So with that background, maybe you can see where the current trend of full body preventative scanning and hypervigilance of health data with things like the Oura Ring can turn into a recipe for disaster, especially among the ultra wealthy.
That the rich oftentimes have bad outcomes. There's like a term for that. It's called VIP syndrome.
Right.
Where people come in and want more when less would actually be better.
Right.
And then on the flip side, our healthcare system sucks. So people who don't have insurance don't get any access, and they get bad outcomes for that reason. So it's like both outliers struggle in this regard. And I see that, and we talk about it so often on the channel, where you ultimately can't purchase good health.
Yeah.
And we see that with celebrities, Michael Jackson requesting certain medications, Steve Jobs trying to go the natural route for treatments of cancer. It's not to say that there would have been a different outcome, but just examples like this are very common.
Yeah. Now, I don't hang out with too many super rich people, but I do know a few. And one thing that I've noticed is that when the rich and powerful get sick, they often try to use their resources to get impossible outcomes. Unfortunately, that often backfires. In one case of someone I know, they had breast cancer and sought out all of the top surgeons in all of the top institutions looking for second, third, and then fourth opinions on her diagnosis. Every testing stop delayed unpalatable but ultimately proven interventions, so that when the standard of care started, well, she was a little bit behind. In another case, and this one's a little bit more tragic, a tech CEO I knew in San Francisco had a sarcoma in her leg. An amputation would have saved her life, but no one wants an amputation. So she went looking elsewhere and tried a range of cutting-edge and alternative therapies. She died 6 months later.
I understand where people are coming from, and I understand the desire for a second opinion, but hard truths are part of the physician-patient relationship. In this case, it may be that money is helping to dilute that relationship, right? They're shopping for somebody who can give them that relationship.
I've had VIP patients who came to see me for cancer and then, well, no, I'm going to Sloan Kettering, I'm going to MD Anderson, because there's the branding with that. And those places have made, do great work, but they do a lot of research. And that's where a lot of their street cred comes from, that, oh, well, we do research. Now, does that mean that you get better actual care at those institutions? It's hard to say.
It's important to remember that the world of commercial and consumer-driven cancer treatments is also a business. People who visit functional medicine doctors almost always pay out of pocket. And when a doctor gets paid for every procedure they provide, they have an incentive to provide more care than what is actually necessary. Here's Kian again.
If you work for someone like Kaiser, where you're paid the same no matter how hard you work, more kind of socialized type thing, then you're probably less likely to really be gung-ho and push the edge versus someone who's maybe out of fee-for-service, we call eat what you kill kind of thing, which is a model, which is a terrible name in healthcare, but a model where the more you do, the more you make. And some people that work for big institutions, their contracts are written to incentivize volume.
And there's one final problem that I want to point out. That is, well, it's probably the most terrifying of all because it's something that patients have almost no control over. To preface this part, I want to play you a famous clip from the 1993 film Malice with Alec Baldwin, who delivered one of the best physician monologues in history. It's a little long, but it's good, so you'll love it.
The question is, do I have a God complex? Which makes me wonder.
In the film, the doctor in question removes a woman's healthy ovaries during a surgery that he thought was necessary, but wasn't. He gets sued for malpractice because of his overconfidence. And while Baldwin's portrayal is deliciously dramatic, the frame of the movie bears an eerie similarity to a study that came out in 2015 in the Journal of the American Medical Association, or JAMA. In that article, the researchers ask an unconventional question about the quality of top-tier medicine and doctors with sterling reputations. I'm going to read to you from the journal's introductory letter. While at the large cardiology conventions, my colleagues and I have often joked that the convention center would be the safest place in the world to have a heart attack. Jenna et al. Have turned that analysis around and looked at outcomes for hospitalized cardiac patients during the time that thousands of cardiologists are at the convention. Contrary to the a priori hypothesis that care would be compromised by so many top cardiologists being gone, they found that adjusted mortality for high-risk heart failure and cardiac arrest is lower at teaching hospitals during the cardiology meetings than during the rest of the year. That is a bombshell. Here's Adam Rodman again.
So this is a very famous study. Effectively, they did an analysis on I think it was in-hospital mortality during the time when cardiology conferences were happening, and it dropped, right? So when the main cardiologists are gone and it's the backup team, the backup team, the people who are not going, in-hospital mortality from these procedures drop.
Now, there are a couple interpretations for why this might be. Rodman noted to me later in our talk that it could be that the top surgeons have higher mortality rates because they are willing to work on sicker patients, and sicker patients die more frequently than healthier patients. But the other interpretation is that as doctors get more confident in their own abilities and feel comfortable delivering more invasive care, they actually end up killing patients that would have lived with a less invasive approach.
Well, I would say that the more invasive you get, with any kind of treatment, the higher your profile, the profile is for significant adverse events.
I hope this video doesn't put you off from seeking medical care when you need it. For the most part, the physicians I know deeply care about patient outcomes. But it is important to realize that seeking out extra health advice and advanced treatments, and advanced screening most importantly, can be counterproductive. And that's a problem that often afflicts the people with the most resources to defy fate. We need to keep in mind that for all of the flaws in our medical system, we still live in the best time for medical knowledge in the history of the planet. We live longer and healthier lives now than at any other point in time. It's just that we are so accustomed to miracle cures that we see them as a right rather than the privilege of being born in modern times. It's also worth noting that poor people do have actually worse health outcomes than rich people, and that's because they don't have access to just the regular standard of care. Before I go, I want to leave you with a little advice from my friend, Dr. Rohin Francis, who has assured me several times that despite being a board-certified cardiologist from some of the best medical institutions in England, he does not have a God complex. To quote directly from our WhatsApp exchange, he says, "A God complex is when you think you are God. I know I'm God." Oh yeah, he actually wrote that. Anyway, all joking aside, his advice is timeless.
You already know the highest yield things that you can be doing for your health, and it's concentrating on the basics. Eat well, sleep well, exercise well, socialize well, mental health well. I know I sound flippant when I say these, but these take work.
Thanks so much for coming here to watch this video on complex issues in healthcare. If you liked the video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and consider checking out my newsletter over at Substack for early access to my videos and to support this channel. From PokeyBear LLC in Denver, Colorado, this was Scott Carney Investigates. Thank you so much to all of my supporters on Patreon and on Substack who make this work possible. If you want early access and to get your name on the honor roll, please check out those links down below. And, you know, it just means the world to me that you're here. From PokeyBear LLC in Denver, Colorado, this was Scott Carney Investigates.